Hey everybody, I hope you're having a fantastic week. I'm Brian Romo with PKI Solutions, and I'm the shopkeeper here at Minding the Key Store, the YouTube channel that talks all things PKI. And today we have another Vault episode that we're pulling back from the archives. It's a session between Mark and the rest of the PKI Solutions team talking with Paul Adare, PM for Public Key Infrastructure at Microsoft. This was at the top of some of the lockdown events that were happening globally, and it's an interesting perspective for how the Microsoft team was adjusting to having data centers locked down and different personnel who couldn't travel to secure locations for offline route CAs and routine maintenance and so on. So it's a fascinating watch. If you haven't gone through the video, it's great information to keep in your back pocket as you're planning out architecture and design decisions for your global PKI going forward. If you've got a large scale enterprise and you're trying to get that rolled out. If you find this or any of the other episodes on the channel useful, we would love it if you would do the YouTube things, like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification icon to let you know when new content comes out. And we would love it if you would comment below. Please share if there's anything that you experienced during the lockdown that was interesting, that prevented you from doing business as usual with your Active Directory certificate services environment. What kinds of difficulties did you face, and how did you overcome them? We'd love to hear in the comments below. Without further preamble, here's our next Vault episode.
This is really our first attempt at providing some office hours, really here to answer some Q&A for everybody, and looking forward to any kind of questions. We've gotten some ahead of time, so we'll get to those as well. If you do have a question, let us know in the Q&A. You can pop something in, and we'll unmute you, let you ask your question. We can chat a little bit and come back to anyone else that's in the room. So we'll get started here in just a minute. Looks like Jake is joining us. Hey, Jake.
How you doing?
All right, and we've got Vadim. So why don't we start with a little bit of introduction for everybody who may not know who we are. Vadims, do you want to start?
No, please.
All right, fair enough.
Not me.
All right, how about you, Jake? How about you start us off? Introduce yourself.
Sure. So Jake Granlenard. I've been with PKI Solutions now for about a year and a half, but I've been doing PKI for about 15 or 16 years now. So I've always been in consulting and had a chance to work with Mark. I actually found Mark from, Mark, I don't know if I ever told you. I found it, I was out looking at the bug fixes.
Oh yeah, the ADCS digest stuff.
Yeah, and saw one of your things out there saying that if you're into PKI, I'd like to talk to you, and that's how it actually all came to be. So,
oh, that's great. And you're based in Tennessee.
Yep, Nashville, Tennessee, just outside of Nashville.
And you are one of our consultants that primarily work with customers doing deployments and support and so forth, right?
Deployments, support, and then assessments, and as we've gone out to their site and looked at their environment. So whatever needs to be done.
Yeah, great. All right, Vadim, so I'm going to come back to you now. So why don't you introduce yourself?
Okay. My name is Vadims. I'm working in PKI field for about 8 or 9 years. I'm mostly focusing on PKI automation, especially focusing on Microsoft ADCS, a product line, and that's probably all. And I'm occasionally writing blog posts. So.
Occasionally, exactly. Okay, so one of the things I've learned about Vadims, if you haven't had a chance to chat with him before, he understates everything he does. He doesn't think anyone reads or cares about anything he does. But he's a fascinating person. And Vadims, tell us about where you live.
I'm living in East Europe, in a small country, Latvia. It is 9 p.m. For me.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate you staying up, and it's great. I'm already kind of seeing some comments over here about Vadams is a legend. Yes, he is. I kind of remember right after I left Microsoft and I was getting started on the TechNet forums. It always seems like the competition was to try to beat Vadams to the responses for any kind of questions, just to get my TechNet numbers higher. So he was always the guy that I felt like I needed to make sure I beat it out. But some of the projects that he's worked on are really great. So we're really glad to have him as part of the team. I'll give myself a quick introduction. I'm Mark Cooper. I started PKI Solutions just about 6 years ago. Well, here's an irony. I just missed it. Yesterday was our 6-year anniversary. PKI Solutions formed April 1st in 2014. I had actually been doing some work before the company was officially formed, but somehow through all of this craziness, I missed our 6-year anniversary. So that was yesterday. But we really wanted to take this opportunity to open ourselves up and see what kind of questions people have. We know there's a lot of challenges going on right now with remote access, and a lot of that stuff is dependent on PKI from identities, from access, as well as this other stuff that's happening out there. And we really wanted to give a platform where people could reach out if you've got issues that you're going on, if you've got questions. We'll just kind of give you an overview. We don't have a set agenda for this. We're really here to chat a little bit about PKI. We've got some questions that people submitted ahead of time. So if you're joining us live, let us know on the Q&A panel. You can pop over there. Just let us know you have a question. You don't have to go super into depth, and we'll let you know that if you've got a question, we'll come to you. We'll unmute your mic, and if you've got a camera, we'll put that on. So if you're working from home, and you would prefer us not to have your camera come on or something like that, let us know as well. But otherwise, we'll bring you over and have that conversation. So if you came along to hear us talk a little bit about PKI, we'll do that. Otherwise, pop over to the Q&A panel and let us know if you've got something. But while we're waiting for people, I'm going to pull up some of the questions that we got submitted ahead of time. One of these, and I'll see if anyone here wants to go to it. Maybe Jake, I'll put this out to you. But we got a question from Doug, and Doug was asking, it was really dealing with web servers and SSL certificates and kind of the auto renewal process. So we think a little bit about web servers and IIS. They're always that place where we have to do a lot of manual enrollments of creating a CSR, getting subject alternative names. And Server 2012 and later has that nice feature to be able to auto renew certificates even with custom SANs, but there's that little bit of extra setting inside of IIS. So their specific question was that they have certificates that are expiring. The certificate was previously issued under a template that allows re-enrollment as long as there's a valid issuing certificate. So they got that property in the template right. But I'm going to read it as it is, and we'll see if you can go exactly what the issue is here. So they say the computer has a web server template that will be expiring. The certificate was issued under a template that allows for re-enrollment as long as there's a valid existing certificate. Permissions on the template allow for domain users and computers to read and enroll, but not auto-enroll. So I'm going to leave it to you. I see two problems already just with that sentence right there. But do you want to talk a little bit about the requirements around auto enrollment permissions, and then maybe a little more specific about the IIS renewal?
Sure. So, and I think we have a question outstanding on one of our blog pages right now to get back to something similar to that. So, I didn't hear you say anything or in the questions about any type of policy being applied to those servers. Is there an assumption that there's policy applied to those servers?
I think they're getting the setting right. In this particular case, the systems just aren't doing the auto enrollment renewal process.
And it was set to everyone has read and enroll, not read and auto enroll?
There you go. So yes, exactly. So if we kind of think about the web servers, they're being configured. They're manually set up with the certificates, but when that IIS certificate comes up for renewal, they're expiring off and not getting renewed.
Right.
So the question is, it really kind of came back to, do they need auto enroll permissions in addition to enroll permissions?
Yes, for those templates. Maybe later on we can touch on. I was having a really interesting conversation with Vadams last week around domain controllers and how they do it a little bit differently, and maybe we can even that's something we may end up writing about. So, but yeah, if they wanted to make sure that those templates are set to auto enroll, so they will re-enroll when the time comes, and then just use the existing template as a information to populate the new certificate that will be issued, so they get their custom SANs names into that new template, or the new certificate from the template.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the enrollment side of things. So if we've got a template that is set for read and enroll, would we expect that is sufficient for a renewal to automatically occur?
Not outside of the domain controllers.
Yeah. Sure. So I think that to answer this question for Doug, the most likely thing is a couple of things. So we're talking about they're already getting the templates enrolled automatically. The two things that we would expect to see in order for IIS to do this automatically on the renewal would be, we need read enroll and auto enroll. So auto enroll is essentially a flag that says, hey, you need to make sure that you have a certificate based on this. It's also what keys things like renewals. So as we're looking at a scenario where a web server is coming up on expiring cert, we need something that is going to cue that system to say you need to perform a renewal. And in the template, we've got the renewal period that's set, and by default 6 weeks. So that's really what's going to trigger IIS to look for the fact that certificate is renewing. A couple of concerns I have off of the way that this question was written. One is the fact that if all domain users and computers have read and enroll permissions to the template, I have concerns. So first of all, there's nothing wrong with certain types of templates like web servers having enroll for users and computers, because sometimes we will have users go through some manual process to request a computer-based certificate. The auto enroll, we would only want to apply auto enroll to the intended object. So if we were going to have a set of IIS web servers doing this auto renewal, we definitely would want to make sure that they're the only systems that are getting that auto enrollment setting through the template ACLs. The other side of this is making sure inside of IIS we've got that checkbox set to update certificates. So that Server 2012 option basically says when you see a new certificate with the same subject name, make sure that you update your bindings, because in IIS we have to have those SSL bindings. All right, so I actually see Doug. Doug is actually with us at this point. So, Doug, if you're all right, pop over to Q&A and let us know if it's okay to bring you on, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about this, because I'm reading your question that you submitted ahead of time. So let's see if Doug is okay joining us, and we can get a little more detail. He is saying that it's only happening about 30% of the time, so maybe there's a little more context or something we can put him at. He says he doesn't have a mic or a camera. All right. Well, in that case, Doug, honestly, probably the best things to do is, if you're only seeing this in certain places, is you may want to check things like the permissions on those IIS web servers, see if they're getting excluded. If you're ACLing the template by groups, and the computers haven't been rebooted. Inconsistencies like that, frankly, in my opinion, rarely are a PKI problem. Like if you see 5% of systems work and 5% don't, that's usually like an ACL or membership or something else that's going on. Would you kind of say the same thing, Jake, or do you have other thoughts when someone says 30% of something works and enrollment works part of the time here and part of the time there?
Yeah, my thought was around, is it the same 30 that are always failing and not that 30%? Just when troubleshooting, I always look for consistency. I'd rather consistent failure than intermittent success. So.
Yeah. Yeah, typically the PKI tends to be an all or nothing thing. Like if the template's set wrong, everything is bad, or if the CA is having problems, nothing enrolls. The weird percentages of things that's somebody else's fault. They've done something wrong in AD, or there's a group membership problem. All right, let's see. We got a couple questions over in Q&A. Darren had a great question here. I love the fact, Darren, that you just go right for the punches and you say, whatever happened to the update to the PKI book? So Darren, let's have a quick conversation if you're good. I'm gonna see if you're willing to come across here and see if you've got a mic set up or not. Let's see here. Doesn't look like he is. All right. So interesting thing. So we all know that there hasn't really been an update from Microsoft in quite some time. Darren, are you there?
Yep.
Hey, how you doing, Darren? Thanks for
Good.
joining us. So you probably have a little more politically incorrect way of asking your question. So why don't you go ahead and rephrase your question?
Well, I remember doing your courses about 4 years ago, and you were talking about Brian, and you were discussing with him whether he was going to ever update the book, and Microsoft weren't keen on releasing it under Microsoft Press.
Yes.
So you thought about self-publishing at some time this book, but we've been keenly waiting for an update to this 2008 book for 12 years. So.
All right. Well. Thanks for asking the question. Well, I'm going to put Jake and Adams on the spot here. Okay, guys, you got a book to write. We'll drop everything else. But a little bit of background on that. So if you look back at how Microsoft ever published a book, it was a fluke of an accident. It was around the Trustworthy Computing Initiative that Bill Gates launched in the early 2000s. And there was a bunch of money thrown around at anything that was security oriented, and the product team said, "Hey, let's do a book." And Brian Komar created the Server 2003 PKI book, but it was really thought to be a one-time thing. There was no errata list that was created. There was no thinking about what's this life cycle going to be. Server 2008 came out. It was kind of a rush to figure out, are we going to do a book? There was a book, and it got published, and then nothing since. And I think a lot of that was due to some changes in the technical writing as well as MS Press. Technical books are never easy to get published. So Microsoft really didn't have an interest. And I'll be honest, I've been talking about wanting to do a book for quite some time. And when I started PKI Solutions, I reached out to Brian. We talked for quite a bit. Frankly, it's a big undertaking. And that partnership never went anywhere on the book. So really where we're at right now is in order to create a updated book, it really means writing from scratch, because that content is owned by Brian. It's not something that we could repurpose. So I think one of the nice things with our focus right now with work from home and our projects that we have, I think we might have a little more bandwidth between Adams and Jake and myself and a few other people that are collaborating. I see Jake's like, oh, okay, great. That we may actually be able to start drafting something out. And I think we'll take a different approach than the previous books, but there's been a lot of updates when it comes to cloud and HSMs as a service. So the whole space has kind of evolved. So I think the best I could say is it's still on our to-do, but I'll make a point to make sure that you get a copy as soon as it comes out.
Oh, good. To look forward to it.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Darren. All right. Well, that question, frankly, is one that comes up quite a bit on our website. Simply because of some of the older posts that are over there. and it's still one where I have a lot of intent, and I think Vadams, for instance, I think there's probably a good portion of the book that could be really written around PowerShell and management capabilities and some of the things you've done with PSPKI. I imagine, when you look at the book or the references that you probably don't see a lot of references to the PowerShell as much as it should. Do you kind of agree with that?
Sure. Yes, because built-in PKI coverage by PowerShell is very narrow. So it is still a big issue, and people have to use my module in order to manage their CA. So from console and do it remotely. So without built-in tools, they have to use Turtle and typing all the times config string in every call is quite boring.
Exactly, and I think there's a lot of opportunities with PowerShell that don't exist today. And Jake, I know you and I were just kind of talking about some of the things that we want to do internally with some of our processes and documentation in PowerShell.
Right. I'm trying to rewrite a lot of our documents and leverage a lot of Vadam's work. And in fact, one of the calls I had with Vadams, I was kind of asking him kind of what all it does, and I think it's so big that he doesn't know all that it does. So trying to get it all in a useful place, but there's we're incorporating it now into our documentation and using it more and more. So I think there's a lot to be said for Vadam's module and which I've used for a long time before I came to work here. So it's great. If you haven't tried it, it's definitely worth downloading and taking a look at it.
Yeah. Oh, great. All right. I'm just taking a look at some of the other questions we have over here. So Miguel, I'm going to see if you're able to join us here. So give me 1 second here and see if Miguel's got a microphone, and we can bring Miguel on.
And I can take this question, probably.
Okay, great. I'm still figuring this one out here. Let's see. Miguel, do you have a mic? Do you want to come on and talk to us? All right, let me see. This is interesting. Always the fun stuff live. Interesting. Miguel, why don't you try to activate your microphone and see if you can come on there. Interesting. All right, let's try now. No? All right,
No.
Miguel, you should be able to unmute yourself. Oh, there comes Miguel. Hey, Miguel, how are you?
Hey, guys. How's
Hey.
everybody doing?
Good. Thanks for joining us. You had a question about some permissions on the
Yeah, that's right. So I was working with a customer recently, and the situation is that they are doing an enroll on behalf, which is based on an enrollment agent. And their thing is that they want to have control over which user groups can actually be enrolled by this enrollment agent. So basically the question was around in the template, actually setting up the read permission versus restricting the enrollment agent directly on ADCS.
All right, Vadams, I think you said you were going to try that one.
Yes. So The right way is to use restrict enrollment agents in ADCS settings instead of templates. Because company may use a single template for several departments, and for every department, an individual enrollment agent can be assigned. Not yes, so everyone has permissions on that template, and they have and they must have permissions there. But enrollment agent for sales department should be able to enroll on behalf of sales accounts on the same template, and say enrollment agent for accountants should be able to perform enrollment on behalf of only accountants on the same template.
I see. Thank you. That makes sense. The other thing I just wanted to comment and maybe ask as well is, in a certificate template, if you set up the read permission, my take, based on my understanding and based on what I've seen during testing, is that the read permission basically marks a template to be discoverable by, a user or a user group.
Yes.
And that seems to apply mostly for the purpose of auto enrollment. Is that the case?
No. Read permissions are necessary just to read template settings at last. It is just an ACL on a file or a folder. Yes, you need at last read permissions to get in there and see what is there. So setting read permissions on template doesn't reduce the security or something else. It is normal.
Yeah,
right.
and we often think of Active Directory as a big repository of information, and if you look at the templates by default, it's set to authenticated users with read permission. So pretty much, if you're an AD, the assumption is if it's not a privileged object like a password hash or something else, it should be readable. And that's actually a place where we've seen problems where if you remove the default read permissions and authenticated users, the CA can't read the templates, because a lot of times we think about who can read and enroll, right? Well, if you remove out authenticated users, the CA can't read the template and doesn't know when a request comes in if it's even matching the permissions on a template. So we actually have a blog article on that. So I know people a lot of times feel like they need to tighten those things down, but having read permissions, authenticated users on templates, I agree with Adam. It's not a security thing. That really is how it's designed to work.
Yes,
right.
and if you are using same template to use for enrollment on behalf of, and with different departments and with enrollment agents assigned to individual departments, then all permissions must be controlled through restrictions. Restricted agents in CA.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Miguel.
Thank you.
And for those of you that are just joining us, if you have some questions you'd like to ask, you can pop over to the Q&A channel. Let us know that you've got a question, and we'll come over to that. I've got another one that was submitted ahead of time. I'm going to give this one over to Jake. And I'm just going to read this email to you. Riva wrote in and said, I'd like to set up code signing certificate templates for our developers and give them instructions for using a semantic or a digicert to timestamp their signed code. That's worked great for a few years until we firewalled off our servers from internet access. No exceptions granted, just for validating timestamps. So I know we've got a few customers that are kind of in the same boat there. So Riva asks, what are my options for in-house or on-prem timestamping services? And specifically, if hardware is the only way to go, the PKI book mentions Encipher's timestamping server. Is it possible that other departments in the company, like the legal or HR, might already have a timestamp server squirreled away if I only knew what to ask for? So I think there's actually probably a couple of questions or thoughts that we could follow up to Riva on that one.
Yeah, so the timestamping is something that seems to get overlooked a lot, and it will come back to haunt later on. But Encipher does have the timestamping. I've actually not enrolled, or I've never rolled that out for a client. It's been cost prohibitive for most of the clients I've been to, so I can't speak firsthand to that. But I do know it is something that they do. As far as another source for the timestamping, I'm not familiar with what other time sources would be familiar in an environment that would fit that bill. That's actually a good question. I've gotten that one before, but I'm not. I'm not familiar with any that would do it.
Yeah. So I think an interesting thing here is, from a timestamping perspective, it's really all about authenticating when something was signed, and the key I heard from there is the fact that they're firewalled off. So I think the few customers that we have that are like that, and I think about the challenges of operating inside of an isolated environment. It's nice and secure, and things are firewalled off. But when it comes to things like timestamping, probably one of the biggest considerations back to Riva would be who is going to be validating this signed code. If it's internal, that's a different story, because then it's all internally based. You can set up your own timestamping appliance, and timestamping is essentially just another code signing certificate. It's asserting what time was something's signed. If it's my own appliance, guess who in the world is going to trust it? It's just like standing up your own PKI, right? So if we stand up a PKI in isolation, then nobody is going to trust it. And same thing with our timestamping. So Riva, one of the issues back would be if you have a timestamping system, is sorry, I just see that Riva's with us right now. It is internals only. Okay, so that's great. So the fact that it's internal only, then that means you can stand up your own timestamping service, because you would essentially have a certificate that's issued to it. You would tell all of your internal systems to trust it. The odds are that there's probably not already a timestamping service in the environment. They're pretty specialized. Probably the best thing you could do is simply ask them, do you have a timestamping appliance? It used to be one where we could say, go down into your data center and look to see if you see an appliance you can't recognize. Adams, have you done much with timestamping or timestamping appliances?
You mean on premises?
Yeah, on-premise ones.
Not.
Yeah. So Riva, the Encipher side is one that we have definitely worked with customers on. The challenge is, at least as of a few months ago, the only way to get the timestamping appliances, for some reason, Encipher only makes available on their PCI card, which means you have to have a physical box, put the PCI card in the PCI HSM. It just runs inside of the Encipher HSM, but it only works right now with the PCI version. It would be much more convenient if you could just take a Connect XE, put in your data center, and be able to reference a timestamping service there. They say that they'll eventually support it. I suspect that, as you kind of commented, if you can't proxy to get out to an external timestamping service, your only option is to do it internally. There's not software-based ones. There are products you can buy. Encipher's one, Assertia, a partner of ours in the UK, ASCERTIA. They're on our partner page as well. They also have a timestamping service. but the likelihood of it being squirreled away is pretty minimal. And on the flip side, it's probably pretty difficult to find out if it's there. So without a little of investigation, it might be a little difficult. But the good thing is, because it is internal, you'll have a lot more flexibility as far as what you could deploy. I'm going to turn, we do have an interesting guest who I've been kind of chatting on the side to see if they are okay joining, and let me bring them on and see if we can talk. So Paul, if you're still sitting at your keyboard, why don't you turn on your camera a little bit and we can chat. Let's see if Paul is going to get turned on here in a second. So Paul Adare is with Microsoft. Many of you may know who he is. He's the current product manager for certificate services with Microsoft. And he said he was willing to come on. He might be a little shy at the moment. There he is. He's coming on board now. Hey, there he is. Hey, Paul.
Hey, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. How are things up in Canada, right?
Yep, they're
Yeah.
good. I'm just actually looking at the lake outside my window, and about half of the ice is gone. So spring's here.
That's not Canadian summer when all the ice is gone.
Yeah, we have 6 months of hockey and 6 months of bad hockey.
Oh, really? It's bad hockey when they fall through the ice.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Excellent. Excellent. Well, for people who may not know who you are, do you want to kind of introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm kind of the secret half of the Brian Komar PKI books. I was the technical editor on the 2008 book, and I was partnered with Brian for about 10, 11 years. And I'm currently working for Microsoft. I work in the Azure Security Services group, and part of my responsibility, I run all of the internal cloud PKIs for Microsoft. And I also, as Mark mentioned, I'm the feature program manager for Active Directory Certificate Services.
So just a few things on your plate.
Yeah, one or two. Yeah, we're
Yeah,
a little busy. We're a little busy right now. I don't know if you saw, but Azure usage in regions with shelter-in-place orders is up 775%.
Wow! Wow! That's some pretty phenomenal numbers.
It is, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, we've been a little busy.
Well, I vaguely remember the last 2 years, anytime I'd reach out to you, you were typically in either on your way to some secure Azure bunker to deploy HSMs and PKIs, on your way back from an Azure bunker, deploying PKI, or planning to go back to a bunker and doing more. So you've been spending the last couple of years really working with Azure and a lot of PKI stuff, haven't you?
That's absolutely true. So yeah, so my team, so the PKIs that we operate, we have currently 7, and they're in our public cloud, our sovereign clouds, and a couple of air-gapped clouds that we have. Now, these are not cloud-based PKI. They're definitely bare metal Active Directory services or Active Directory certificate services instances, but we issue all the smart cards for Microsoft employees and Microsoft vendors that because all our environments require 2FA. We issue obviously domain controller, KDC certs, and then out of one of our PKIs, we also issue TLS certificates to all of our Azure services for service-to-service communication. We don't do any public certs, just ones that are internal only. That one right now, I think in the last year and a half, we've issued somewhere around 5 million certs out of that PKI.
Wow. And I think I've seen some integration. We're doing some things in Azure right now where you guys have kind of streamlined the ability to get TLS certificates, even from a commercial provider. I think it's GoDaddy, honestly. But there's been some integration work that you guys have done to really make it easier to get that kind of stuff.
That's true, absolutely. For web apps and app service, you can use Azure to get free certificates, and that was put together by somebody who's on my team, Mark, who you know quite well, Rashmi Jha,
Oh, yeah.
who for years and years and years was the ADCS featured PM. So yes, I work quite closely with Rashmi. She's on my direct team.
Excellent, excellent. Well, it certainly has made it much easier to be able to do those sorts of things. So, what if any impact that you can talk to from a PKI perspective and the COVID-19? No, are there challenges that you guys have been facing as far as getting people set up or identity things or strain on existing PKI environments? What are some of the challenges you guys have been seeing?
So that's a really good question, and we have two currently. So we recently stood up a new Active Directory forest, actually two forests for identity isolation. And our plan was to deploy the PKI in 4 different regions. So we were going to do US West, US East, EMEA, which would be in Amsterdam, and APAC, which would be in Melbourne. And right now, we've only got US West set up because that's like a 2.5-hour drive from campus. We can't finish the deployment in EMEA because we can't travel to Amsterdam right now. We certainly can't travel to Melbourne. So, I mean, that environment is currently kind of in internal private preview. So we're good with the 2 CAs that we have currently in the environment, but definitely for redundancy, we need to, as soon as possible, deploy the rest. And then the other big one is the root CA certificate revocation list in China is due for renewal in the middle of June. And our policy is that we have to have 3 full-time employees, 2 of which have to be from the PKI team, on the raised floor in the data center in front of the rack anytime private key materials being accessed. So we're trying to, we do have a partner company that actually operates most of the Chinese environment for us. So we're trying to come up with a contingency plan that somehow we can relax the policies for this one instance and get them to do the work for us. Or failing that, in that environment, because it's really all smart card logon, we're also thinking about using a group policy to artificially extend the lifetime of the existing root Crl.
Yeah.
So yes.
I think that's a really important aspect, because I know one of the things that's occurred to me, and I'll be interested to hear Jake and Vadams if they've got a thought in this regard. But one of the things that's occurred to me is that we're kind of in this immediacy right now of getting people set up and getting things issued and hoping everything stays healthy. But yet there are these constant timers and validity periods inside of our PKI that the longer we're in this kind of state, will begin to become challenges. And our online CAs, if they're configured right, should be kind of churning away. But things like our offline route, it's not uncommon to have those publishing 1, 2, 3, 4 times a year or more. Hardware security modules that are often physical sitting in our data center. Some of these things are designed around either air-gapped technology or physical things that I think some of our customers are in short term going to have to start thinking about what is our plan for those things that are coming up in late April, May, June, and not really necessarily knowing what the state's going to be is how do we protect ourselves? How do we protect the people we work with? But how do we make sure our PKI doesn't suddenly start falling apart 4 weeks, 8 weeks down the road? It's great that remote access is working now, but what's that next thing that we have to worry about?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had a question come in on the certificate services discussion list, which I know you were quite active on, Mark, but it was from a consultant, and their customer, the only way they can renew their client auth certs for their SSL VPN access is if they're physically connected to their corporate network. So they wanted to know, they said, we've got a whole bunch of people whose certs are getting ready to expire. They can't go into the office. Is there a way we can configure it to accept expired certificates? And I said, no, you can turn off revocation checking, but you can't prevent the check of an expired cert. So,
and to that point, I would have wanted bigger grimaces on Jake and Vadam's faces when you said disable revocation checking. Anyone that knows me knows that that's a sticking issue. So, Vadam, do you have any thoughts about some of the challenges coming up and timelines and things that people should be thinking about if we're kind of in this extended work from home scenario for a few months?
Not yet.
Yeah. All right. How about you, Jake? Any thoughts coming to mind?
Yeah, I was having a conversation yesterday with one of our clients. They're getting ready to try to plan a ceremony to go sign their root CRL, and it's challenging trying to keep everyone's supposed to go to this room. They're trying to maintain some level of separation, and what we did look at, just we don't really know when this is going to come to an end, is make a little extra overlap for them this time, just to protect them for the next one, and to make sure that it's not something that will be as critical this time, since there isn't much of an overlap. So they really need to get in there and do it. So that's one of the things that I talked to them a little bit about yesterday, is making sure that, for this one, we are kind of where we are, but for the next one, you can protect yourself a little bit by extending that overlap this time.
Perfect. Well, Paul, I appreciate you jumping on, making our conversation a little more interesting today. And I feel honored that you took some time out of your day to come talk PKI with us. So I appreciate that.
No worries. We were dealing with remediation from a big outage a couple of weeks ago. So my manager insisted I take the day anyway.
So you decide just to geek out with more PKI.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me,
all right.
Mark.
Thanks for coming along, Paul.
Jake and Vadam, thank you.
All right. Take care. Take care. For those of you that are still joining us live, if you've got questions, you can pop over to the Q&A and let us know you've got a question. We've got still a few pending questions that are out there, so I appreciate everybody getting those submitted. We've got a question here. Let's see if James is still with us. James
would like
asked a
to
question.
take it.
Yeah, you want to take this one, Vadam? So let me read the question, and I'll let Vadam take this one. So James asked, can we briefly discuss the pros and cons of where CDPs are located, meaning Active Directory, HTTP, a file? I'm configuring a new PKI right now and have only an LDAP and file CDP. I'm considering whether to add others. Only current certificate uses web servers, but need to be able to expand in the future. So definitely the right time to be asking this question is now rather than down the road. So Vadam, what are your thoughts there?
So my opinion is plain and simple, HTTP only. So it is 2020 and LDAP makes very little sense in modern PKIs when you deal not only inside corporate perimeter, and you're using them outside, say for remote desktop gateways and so on. So it is HTTP and single URL, and don't waste your time on anything else. The benefit of LDAP was that it is automatically replicated across all domain controllers in a forest, and when client checks CRL from Active Directory, it will pick CRL from closest nearest domain controller. And so there are no latency delays with poor network connection and so on. And now internet channels are wide, big, and you can provide pretty high availability on internet, for example, using Azure CDN. So you will get CRL from nearest data center, whether you live in Australia, in Asia or North America, or even in Greenland.
Yeah. And Jake, you got some thoughts to add to that?
And HTTP provides benefits that you can't get with LDAP, such as support for prefetch, e-tags. So revocation checking is more actual because clients time by time poll web services for updated CRL, even if it is not yet expired.
Yeah. So Jake, what are your thoughts there?
My thoughts are, I agree with everything Vadam's saying, but I also go to enough clients that if someone is absolutely adamant that they want LDAP listed in there, if I list it second, then there are just times where, for whatever reason, it may not be logical or based on technical, but I'm not going to fight someone to keep it at a single. I agree 100% with what Vadam said, but
sure,
it's a compromise I'll definitely make.
Yeah. I think we could probably have an hour-long conversation on the pros and cons of CDP ordering and client appeasement, but I know my thoughts are in the same lines. HTTP is really the one that works for everybody. Vadam's is right; it takes a little more effort. You have to set up that load balancing or global availability. HTTP is definitely universal across, but Active Directory is already there. So for some environments where we're doing primarily internal things to say, hey, LDAP is a secondary one. All I have to do is click this button, and if my web servers go down or my F5 fails, at least all my Windows clients can go Active Directory. There's nothing wrong. You're not going to hurt anything, but it may be unnecessary work. If you've got a large CRL, it's more stuff to replicate around. So at a minimum, we usually start exactly where Vadam said. Set up some HTTP, do the load balancing. If for some reason you've got mitigating factors or some other kind of concern, go somewhere else. I also thought this was timely because Jake, you and I were just having a chat in Teams a little earlier about Azure and some CDP. You had found a blog article. It was actually a few years old that somebody had written of using a tool that, frankly, I didn't know existed, the AZ copy, where it's a Windows tool to copy files to Azure.
Yeah, one of our clients actually sent it to me. I didn't know it existed either. But from the classes, when we go through and we talk about the cloud and Azure, in a hybrid scenario, one of the things that makes the most sense, at least to me and to most clients, that they're most willing to let go of internally is, hosting that CDP. So it's a chance to get it out there and be hosted by a third party and, reap all the benefits of it being, like Vadam said, it's available all over the world, and it's not, they not have to phone home to the mothership continually. So.
Yeah, and you know, James, you asked a question over here in the sidebar of you know, do we just make the HTTP redundant? And yeah, you know, set up the redundancy for HTTP. You know, obviously wherever you have a single point of failure, that's where there's a potential problem. But beyond that, of you know, setting up a highly available HTTP internally and externally might be something to consider, in that if you put everything in Azure or AWS, it may be highly available, but if you lose WAN connectivity or access to the cloud or the internet, you wouldn't want your internal systems to fail as well. But in that case, perhaps it's just a single internal IIS server, and name resolution prefers your external. You get the availability from a CDN provider, and then if that's not working, you can get it internally as well. One of the interesting things that Jake and I were talking is we may need to update or create our own blog of that, because the inefficiency in the blog post that we found basically was the old mentality of every day at 1 a.m. copy the CRL to Azure. It could have been much better to set up a triggered task to say, look for event 4872, which is a CRL's been created, and then have that kick off the script to copy up to Azure. So there's probably some more pointed ways of doing that. Just looking at the time here, I've got another question I want to get to here, and I'll turn this one to Jake. This one was around Endis, and I'm going to read it as it is. I think we could just translate the word token to password. But Andre asked, hey guys, is there any way to configure Endis to only generate one password to issue a lot of certificates with that?
You can set up, you can configure it to be a single password. And that's, there's lots of different articles out there I've seen on that, but so you don't set that password, it will automatically create it for you, but it will create, you can use the same password over and over again. When you go back to that setting, you can set the registry back. So yes, you can have it do that. It's a bit of a security risk, obviously, since it's the same password, and if that gets out, anyone who has that password can request that certificate. But it's something that can be done. We have a client that we do it during mass rollouts of their appliances. We'll turn it on, and then we create a script that'll roll it off and set it back to a one-time password at the end of that period where they're done rolling out all those appliances.
Yeah, and you know, anytime that you set Endis to a static password, you're going to do that in the registry. As Jake kind of pointed out, there's definitely going to be security concerns. So it may be more convenient, and maybe something that you enable for a defined period mass enrollment. Just remember human nature: people forget things, people move on, people get distracted. It's very easy to leave that behind. So where possible, if you can use the dynamic password approach for Endis, you're going to be a much better boat. But we always look at PKI and security from a pragmatic standpoint. Business is business. Organizations need to get things done. Extenuating circumstances. Just make sure you're aware of what risk you're accepting, and it just doesn't get forgotten. So I'm just looking at time. I think we've got one more question that we can get to. Vadams, I'll put this one over to you. Riva had another question. I'm interested to see how you want to respond to this one. Riva asked, what GPO settings would help with an expired root CRL? So I think we can see where this is potentially coming from, but what are some of the things that an organization can do if for some reason their root CRL expired off?
So if root CRL is expired, first thing you should do is to try to get a new one, which is not expired. Yes,
yes.
There
you go. I like that. I like that answer. Can we just leave it there? Can we? No. All right. So I agree. Let's renew if you could.
Yes. So but while you are trying to get root CA back, you can use group policies to extend expired CRL validity to some time. It is done in computer configuration, Windows settings, security settings, again,
just off the top of his head.
local settings, yes, and you get to the public key policies, and there you will find an entry called certificate path validation settings. There are several tabs. Sorry, I can't paste the images in the chat, and there is a setting called allow CRL and OCSP responses to be valid longer than their lifetime. So, and you can enable this setting and provide an extended time in hours.
Excellent. So yeah, I think that the main thing is if we can, let's get the CRL republished. We could probably even add the one that went unspoken there of a plan. If you know your CRL is going to expire down the road, you can create it early. So if you know it's going to expire in 6 weeks and you're wondering how are you going to get renewed in 6 weeks, if you're in there now. Perhaps you're having to carry to some other tasks. You can always renew your CRL early. There's nothing wrong with that. But if that doesn't work, then there are some options in group policy to extend the CRL.
Yes, just don't use this setting all the time.
Exactly. Again, remember the human nature. You'll set it now, you put in group policy, and you'll forget about it later on. Never a great idea. The other one that is out there, and it's a little bit harder, is if you had planned for something that we call emergency CRL signing. There is a method where if your CA is not available, meaning somehow you still have access to the HSM where the key is, or perhaps you're set up where you've got access to an equivalent HSM, and you've got the ability to assemble your quorum, and you've got backups. You may not be able to physically get to your air-gapped root, but you're able to connect and get access to your HSM, and you've got your operator cards. There is a way where if you can essentially reconstruct that CA signing key and the certificate, you don't actually have to have the CA living to create the CRL. Really what you could do is you could take an existing CRL that's about to expire from the CA. If you have access to that CA's key, you can re-sign it. So cert util sign will allow you to re-sign the CRL as long as it's still the CA's key. You can't change the contents, but now you could sign it and say, okay, let's push this out 4 more weeks or 8 more weeks. And we talk about this in our disaster recovery. So this is the way that you could take the existing contents and re-sign it if you're able to perhaps get a hold of a backup of your CA. If you're not using an HSM, you've got the CA key protected in a PFX, or like I said, you're able to reconstitute the quorum and you've got the files you need for your HSM. You could re-sign your CRL. So you've got a couple of options there. Well, it looks like we're just coming up on the end of our hour. I
have a couple of words. Yes, that you can re-sign expired CRL with PowerShell, using a PowerShell PKI module.
Excellent. Yeah, Jake, any thoughts you want to end on?
No, actually the thing that pops out of this to me is of these questions. We're always looking at different ideas for blogs and everything. If there's a way of collecting ideas, because there's no shortage of topics for us to write on, but if there's something that would be appealing to more, then that would be great to hear.
Yep. And again, thanks for everybody for joining us. We hope that the information was valuable. It really was meant to be a way for us to help everyone out in the current work from home and challenges in managing the PKI. If there are questions we couldn't get to, feel free to follow up. You can reach us, the PKI guy, at pkisolutions.com, and I'll make sure that I get these off to Jake or myself or Vadams. We'll look to do this again. So if you found it valuable, let us know. We want to make sure that people are getting access to the information and are helping their organizations out. Plus, it's a great time for us to get together and geek out a little bit with PKI. And if we see that there's enough interest, we'll do this again. And we appreciate the time and your questions. So stay safe. Take care of your family, take care of work, and don't forget to take care of your CRLs. They're coming up.
Yeah.
All right, farewell. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.